Bonjour, soyez bienvenue au vidéo de Passé Composé avec avoir. This is the easiest form that you're going to learn to talk about things that happened in the past. But in order to talk about the past, let's review what we already know. In order to do this, let's talk about the présent and the futur proche. The présent is the plus facile, right? These are verbs that we've already learned how to conjugate. Être, to be, avoir, to have, aller, et faire. Are verbs, super facile patterns, and you're going to see even more easy patterns coming right up. So we're going to take what we know about the present tense and apply it to future and, of course, le passé. So when we conjugate any verb in the present form, we wind up with 3 translations in English. For example, je mange tous les biscuits, I mean I eat all the cookies, I am eating all the cookies, or I do eat all the cookies, which can be confusing for some students because they want to put je suis mange les biscuits, but that means I am the action of eats the cookies, which doesn't quite make sense. So if we can remember that when we conjugate a verb in French, it means 3 things, we're going to be off to a good start. But same thing with the futur proche. We will see that it has those 3 meanings as well. So do go, am going, and will, which can be even more complicated. So let's step back just a moment and talk about the futur proche. This is for events that are possible and they're in our near future. All we have to do to form this is use aller, which is super simple. Je vais, tu vas, il va, nous allons, vous allez, ils vont. And then create this tense using that conjugated verb for your subject and then any infinitive that we want. So if I'm going to eat, je vais manger, which is super facile. But notice just the same way in the present, there's 3 meanings. There's I go, I am going, and I will eat all the cookies. Now, normally the futur proche is très simple because you can think, oh yeah, I am going to eat. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, of course I need an infinitive. Je vais manger. I'm going to eat. But when we think of it as meaning will, that comes to be a wee bit of a problem because then we have 2 conjugated verbs when we're directly translating. We don't say je vais manger, je vais manger. So we're going to take what we've just learned about the présent, well, what we reviewed about the présent and the futur proche with the passé. Now there are 4 forms of the passé. There's the passé composé, which is the plus facile. Well, maybe imparfait is even more easy. Le passé simple, which is only used in literary forms. And le plus que parfait, which will help us describe events that are even further back. But let's focus on the plus simple, okay? And we use the plus simple, this passé composé with avoir for events that are isolated or sudden actions, like jumping out of an airplane. Hier, je suis allée au marché. Yesterday, I went to the market. So, isolated incident. Several successions of actions that tend to be very short in duration, like you're listing things that you did yesterday or last week. You know, j'ai mis mon manteau, j'ai pris mon portefeuille, je suis partie, I got my coat, I got my wallet, and I left. Any action that lasted for a specific amount of time, and now it's over, and you know that specific amount of time. So, for example, going to a movie, that always has its specific set of time. Or if you're giving that person that indicated amount of time, for example, j'ai habité 3 ans à Paris. I lived for 3 years. I'm telling you that time period à Paris. And then, of course, actions that are repeated a certain number of times, but now it's over. You know how many times, or in general, the number of times, and you're going to give that information. Donc, j'ai joué à 10 matchs de basketball l'année passée. So you're knowing that you've played 10 games of basketball last year. So the passé composé is great for listing things. It's commonly used to refer to actions that were completed in the past and can be translated into English in 3 ways as well. So, j'ai mangé les biscuits means I ate the cookies, I had eaten the cookies, and I did eat the cookies. Ça va? Okay. So, let's talk about forming the passé composé. Now that you've seen it once, you can probably figure out we have 2 verbs. And there's 3 steps to this process. But maybe for now, you only focus on the first 2. So, first we need a helping verb. Then we need a participe passé. And third step is whether or not we're going to agree. So let's talk about the step 1, choosing your auxiliary verb. This means you either use être or avoir. And we know those conjugations so well that it's going to be facile, right? And we also know that there are about 9,000 verbs in French. And when we talk about the passé composé, out of those 9,000 verbs, only a handful will be conjugated with être. So if you're unsure, choose avoir, because avoir will be the most helpful. So let's talk about then the second step, the participe passé. We have a couple groups of verbs that we've already learned. For example, we've learned some ER verbs, some RE verbs, some IR verbs. Now let's talk about how to form a participe passé. It kind of looks like an adjective, you know, like the verb was turned into an adjective. So let's start off with dormir. What we do is we take off the IR and we add an I. Donc, il a dormi. Okay? Vendre, you take off the RE and you add U. Donc, tu as vendu, you sold. So, he slept, you sold. Et finalement, manger, you take off the ER and you add E accent aigu. And you gotta remember, this is a past participle. You can't put these in normal verbs or present. This is not present. This is called a participe passé because it's not a conjugation. You're going to use this with all forms of avoir. Your avoir will change, these will not. There are some irregular participe passé, but in general, if you remember ER, E accent aigu, RE, U, IR, I, you'll be good. Here's a list of commonly used ones. Donc we have eu, été, allé, bu, fait, dit, écrit, lu, parti, pu. Notice that funny U sound is very tight. The jaw is very tight and your lips are rounded. Voulu, pris, compris, répondu, vu, vécu, conduit, cru, mis, né, wow, ri, su, tenu, is suivi. And you'll see some similar patterns when you're starting to learn any of these irregulars. And I'll try to post a handout of those. So the passé composé avec avoir. Let's think of something like we want to say, oh, yesterday I spoke at a convention. Okay, so we know that avoir is going to be handy. To speak is parler, so I find it's an ER verb. I'll just add that ending. And since it's describing an event, it's narrating events that are occurring that I spoke at that convention, I'm going to say j'ai parlé. And it can mean 3 things in English. I spoke, I did speak, and I had spoken. C'est facile? Now, we always want to make our language fluid and wonderful and giving lots of information. And there are key words that are going to tell us, hey, I should use the passé composé and make my language more full. So, hier, yesterday. Avant-hier, before yesterday. La semaine dernière, last week. La semaine passée, last week as well, or the past week. Lundi dernier, last Monday. Le mois dernier, last month. L'année dernière, l'année passée, last year. Il y a 3 jours. Oh, I love this expression. So you put il y a and then a number of time, and that means that much time ago. So now here, il y a kind of means ago. Donc, il y a 3 jours, 3 days ago. Il y a 8 semaines, 8 weeks ago. C'est super amusant. And then any date spécifique. If you're saying a specific date, you're going to be using le passé composé. And here's some uses of those. Le mois dernier, j'ai acheté des chaussettes de Star Wars. J'adore porter Yoda sur mes pieds. Last month, I bought some Star Wars socks. I like to wear Yoda on my feet. Il y a 8 semaines que j'ai vu une émission avec les personnes réelles. N'aie pas d'enfants. I don't know if you've had the same thing, like, you don't get to watch TV with real people anymore. My Little Pony has become all you get to watch when you have kids. So there's your warning. So not only are nice key words going to help make your passé composé more fluid, but adverbs. We always want to include adverbs in our speech whenever we can because they give so much information and they make us sound fluent. So where do we put them? Well, with time, we can often put them at the beginning of our sentences. And there tends to be one simple kind of rule. If they're a small adverb, they tend to go between or right after that conjugated verb avoir, and then before the past participle. If it's a long adverb, like it ends in ment, then it's often going to go after both because it's so heavy it's got to be attached later. So let's take a look at some of those examples. Adverbs. La semaine dernière, vous avez sans doute passé un examen difficile. And remember, passé means taken, not passed. So last week, you have without a doubt taken a difficult test. And heureusement, notice this is an adverb of time, or not of time, but of this general, oh, happily, this occurred. You can put that at the beginning. Heureusement, vous avez surtout étudié plus que les autres. You had above all, surtout, étudié, studied plus que les autres. And notice plus que les autres is going to go after because it's part of that comparative. Plus tôt, earlier, notice this is a time adverb. I can put at the beginning of my sentence. Then I have a really long one, which means awkwardly, right? Maladroitement. J'ai porté maladroitement une robe parce que j'ai dû faire la lessive. Nobody likes to do la lessive. So again, that makes it fluid. Negation, we still might want to use negation in our passé composé. Say what we did not do. We can use ne pas and ne jamais, and there's several more, which watch out for that video when that comes. So let's talk about those examples. They follow similar rules because that pas or jamais is going to go between the auxiliary and the past participle. So basically, it's still sandwiching the conjugated verb. The ne goes in front and the pas goes after. So, hier, je n'ai pas mangé tous les biscuits. That's a lie, if I ever heard one. Yesterday, I didn't eat all the cookies. I totally ate all the cookies. Avant-hier, je n'ai jamais fait beaucoup de biscuits. Before yesterday, I had never made a lot of cookies. Also a lie. I always make extra because I eat them all. But as you can see, the negation is sandwiching avoir, which is our auxiliary verb. We can still write questions in the passé composé, like, what have you done? And we follow the same rules. Remember that you don't need that do or are exactly in French. You need your subject and your verb and your question mark. So, vous avez étudié beaucoup, you studied a lot, can mean not only did you study a lot, or are you studying a lot, or you're studying a lot. So, it means all three of those, so you don't need an extra do or are in there. If you feel like you need something, you can always add est-ce que. Est-ce que vous avez étudié beaucoup? Have you studied a lot? And then if you want to sound more formal, you can always use inversion, which is basically a switching around of the subject and the verb and then marrying them together with a bar. Donc, avez-vous, notice, avez our verb, vous a subject, and then étudier. So questions will also draw in our listeners or our readers. And Passé Composé is going to allow us to give so much more information. It's going to narrate a bunch of events. Like, ce matin, mon réveil matin a sonné tôt. This morning, my alarm clock woke me early, and my alarm clock's my son. J'ai aidé mon fils à faire pipi, à s'habiller, se brosser les dents. Ma fille est super, elle peut faire tout ça toute seule. Puis j'ai fait du café et j'ai mangé, j'ai bu le café. Nous avons mis nos manteaux et j'ai marché à l'arrêt de l'autobus et j'ai conduit mon fils chez leur babysitter et puis je conduis au travail. Alors j'ai oublié. So you're giving this wonderful list of all these things that you're doing. And that is a good thing because then you can compare events. You can do all kinds of more communicative strategies and effective communication using the passé composé. And remember, for now, all you need to know is find your auxiliary verb, your participe passé, and stop the video now if you don't want to know anything about agreement, if it's too much. Because there's a rule that even French people tend to get confused about. And this is that if there's a direct object placed before the auxiliary verb, it has to agree. And you're thinking, okay, what is a direct object? It's the who or what of the sentence. Donc, j'ai donné mes chocolats à Bob. I gave what to Bob? The what. That with no to or at, the what is direct. The to Bob is indirect. I don't worry about the indirect because it's to Bob. If I put that direct object in front, I have to agree with the past participle has to agree with that. Okay, so go backwards. This is what you need to know. Step 1, auxiliary verb. Step 2, participe passé, and you've got le passé composé. If you want to learn more, stay tuned for the passé composé avec être plus tard.